My name is Serafina Vance, but for the past 32 years, I've just been Julian's sister, the quiet one who somehow never quite fit the mold of New York aristocracy. The stage for the ultimate humiliation was set on a freezing January morning in the mahogany-paneled boardroom of Blackwood and Finch, Dad's old law firm, overlooking the biting wind whipping off the Hudson River. It was the reading of the will. Julian, my older brother, the golden heir apparent, was already lounging in the high-backed leather chair at the head of the impossibly long table, his silk tie perfectly knotted, his expensive watch catching the weak morning light. He had Mom on his left, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, a performance worthy of Broadway, and his own lawyer, a smarmy man named Sterling, on his right, already stacking his papers like he'd won the game before it started. I sat at the far end, deliberately choosing the chair closest to the door, next to the only person I trusted in that room, Clara Hayes, a sharp-eyed corporate litigator I'd paid a small fortune to attend as my observer. The air was thick with the scent of old money, leather polish, and my brother's barely contained smugness. Julian had been rehearsing this moment since he was a teenager, since Dad first started whispering about the Vance legacy and the responsibility of the next generation. He saw himself as the undisputed king. I was merely a footnote. Dad's personal attorney, Mr. Harrington, cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the vast, silent room. He picked up the first of two thick white envelopes. As per the explicit final instructions of Mr. Alistair Vance, we shall proceed with the reading of the primary will. Before he could even break the seal, Julian turned, caught my eye down the long stretch of polished wood, and let out a short, dismissive laugh, a sound that was more of a sneer than actual amusement. "This is a formality, Sarah," he said, his voice loud, dripping with practiced condescension. "You don't belong here. Just sign the waiver and be done with it. You already got your allowance over the years, after all." He didn't mean the small stipend Dad sent me. He meant the decade I spent silently fixing his messes. But that's a story for a moment when the stakes were higher, when the cameras were rolling, not just the eyes of a few indifferent lawyers. I didn't flinch. I just met his gaze, my expression completely blank. He wanted a reaction, tears, anger, a hasty retreat. He got nothing. I didn't waste my voice. Instead, I shifted my weight, reaching into the oversized black tote bag I'd placed next to my chair, and my fingers brushed against the hard, reassuring edge of the second envelope, the one I knew was my only card in this rigged game. Mr. Harrington's voice began to drone, listing off assets Julian already considered his: the Greenwich estate, the majority share in the family holding company, the controlling interest in the philanthropic trust Dad had poured his life into, the real prize, the one that gave a Vance power in this city. Every asset, every dollar amount, every legacy item was directed straight to Julian. Mom nodded along, her eyes shining with approval. Sterling, Julian's lawyer, gave a subtle, victorious smile. After 20 agonizing minutes, Harrington reached the section regarding me. He paused, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "To my daughter, Serafina. The 5-figure sum in her personal checking account, which she has, quite frankly, managed to maintain through a stubborn independence I have never quite understood. And a complete set of the family silver from the 1920s, which she always seemed to admire." That was it. 5 figures, the silver, and a backhanded compliment about my stubborn independence. Julian burst out laughing, a full, booming sound that bounced off the windows. He leaned forward, tapping his pen on the table. "Told you, you don't belong here. Now, if we can move on to the actual business." I finally spoke, my voice low and steady, cutting through his mirth. "There is one thing you all seem to be overlooking, Julian, Mom, Mr. Harrington." The laughter stopped. Every head snapped toward me, Julian's smug grin freezing mid-smirk. I leaned slightly forward, resting my hands on the table. Dad also left a second letter. It was sent to me privately 3 weeks ago, with strict instructions to be given to my own counsel, Clara Hayes, for immediate opening only after the primary will reading concluded. I paused, letting the silence swallow the room. Julian's face was suddenly void of color. He shot a look at Harrington, who was now sweating visibly. I knew exactly why. My father, in his final, manipulative act, had orchestrated this public shaming, but he had also provided me with an escape clause, a final test. Clara, I said, looking at my lawyer, open the envelope. Before we continue with the reading of the second will, I want to ask you, have you ever been publicly humiliated by the people who were supposed to protect you? If you have, please let me know by hitting the like button on this video. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications so you don't miss the epic conclusion of Serafina's story. The air was so still I could hear the faint snick of Clara's thumbnail slicing the wax seal of the second envelope. Julian was staring at the table like the wood paneling held the secrets of the universe. He was scrambling, his mind racing to understand what possible contingency Dad could have included. He had spent the last year of Dad's life micromanaging the old man, isolating him, and ensuring every document was signed, sealed, and delivered according to his own master plan. What he failed to grasp was that my father was a control freak, yes, but he was also a man who appreciated a good chess move. He'd taught us both to play, Julian with pomp and noise, me with silence and anticipation. Julian had just realized he'd been checkmated, but he didn't know the move yet. Clara pulled out a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper and began to read, her voice entirely devoid of emotion, a professional weapon in that room of amateur actors. To Serafina, who saw the fire and walked toward it. The 5-figure sum and the silver are yours, of course, but the real inheritance is the peace you have earned, and the power I had to hide from Julian to keep him from destroying it. This sealed letter contains 2 documents. First, a certified irrevocable deed of trust, dated 6 months ago, assigning you, Serafina Vance, as the sole managing trustee of the Alistair Vance Charitable Trust, effective immediately. Second, a sworn affidavit confirming that the $15 million shortfall discovered in the trust's endowment last May, the one everyone attributed to market volatility, was in fact the result of a margin call on a series of disastrous, unauthorized options trades placed by my son Julian Vance over a 90-day period. I know you fixed it, Sarah. Now use what I gave you. The room exploded. Mom gasped, the sound high and reedy. Julian shot up, sending his chair crashing to the floor. That's a forgery! A lie! Harrington, you didn't witness this! He screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the silent lawyer. Mr. Harrington simply looked down. The document, Mr. Vance, was notarized by a private third party in my absence, as per your father's final wishes. The trust deed appears to be fully compliant and recorded with the New York Secretary of State as of November 1st. I knew this moment was coming because I had caused it. 11 months ago, Dad had been hospitalized after a minor stroke, which for a man obsessed with control was a death sentence waiting to happen. Julian immediately swooped in, armed with a carefully manipulated, durable power of attorney. He didn't care about Dad's health. He cared about liquidating assets to cover his disastrous debts before they went public. I watched him from a distance, the silent daughter, crunching numbers late into the night. It wasn't the Greenwich House or the holding company that mattered, it was the trust. The trust owned the landmark Vance Tower, the sole income source for dozens of city programs. Julian planned to leverage the tower's equity to pay off his options losses, effectively bankrupting the foundation and destroying the family name's only respected facet. I couldn't let that happen. Not because I loved the family name, but because I'd spent a decade as a low-level analyst learning how to move corporate mountains, and the chaos would destroy the innocent, the foundation staff, the charities, the tenants in the tower. So I used my own money, every bonus, every investment, every penny I had saved for my own quiet future, $15 million transferred over 48 hours in a series of completely legal, completely untraceable wire transfers, labeled simply as Endowment Capital Injection Anonymous Donor. I saved the trust. I saved Julian from immediate exposure. But I became broke and homeless overnight, moving into a friend's spare room. I never told Dad. I only left him a cryptic note. The fire has been extinguished. The tower is secure. He never thanked me. He never mentioned it. Instead, he crafted this spectacle, watching me take the shame, only to drop this final, complicated paper bomb on Julian's head. He knew the $15 million was a drop in the bucket to the Vance wealth, but it was my everything. Now, Clara was holding the deed that gave me control over the entire Vance philanthropic empire, the foundation, the tower, the name, a legacy Julian believed was his birthright. Julian's lawyer Sterling stood up, finally finding his voice, but it was shaky. Ms. Vance, While this deed is concerning, the primary will still direct the majority of the liquid estate to my client. This trust is an encumbrance, a responsibility. It doesn't change the fact that Mr. Julian Vance is still a very wealthy man. Clara didn't even look at him. She slid the affidavit across the table toward Julian, directly over the spot where his spilled water had soaked the will's cover sheet. Julian finally read the words, the specific dates, the exact trades, the margin calls. He wasn't just exposed, he was detailed. And that's when he went from angry to utterly terrified. Julian's terrifying silence was more potent than his previous screaming. He was trapped. The trust was the single biggest entity in the Vance financial portfolio, and I now controlled it. More than that, the affidavit exposed him to multiple federal charges: securities fraud, market manipulation, and breach of fiduciary duty, all connected to Dad's power of attorney, which Julian had abused. Mom was staring at me now, not with anger, but with a sudden dawning fear that her golden boy was about to be obliterated by the daughter she'd always ignored. The humiliation Julian had intended for me was now ricocheting off the mahogany walls and striking him with brutal force. Clara, my silent weapon, took the stage. Mr. Vance, as the sole managing trustee of the Alistair Vance Charitable Trust, Ms. Serafina Vance has full and complete legal authority to investigate and recover any assets lost due to mismanagement or fraud. This includes, but is not limited to, civil action against you for the $15 million, as detailed in this affidavit. It also includes notification of the SEC regarding unauthorized and illegal trading activity while acting under a power of attorney. Sterling, Julian's lawyer, looked like he was about to faint. He leaned down and whispered fiercely in Julian's ear, but Julian didn't respond. He just kept staring at the paper, the specific trade numbers, CLX puts, June 2024, a secret he thought had died with our father. Julian had always lived in the illusion of his own competence, believing his charm and the family name would shield him from consequences. Dad, however, had left a paper trail large enough to ensure Julian's ruin if he ever pushed me too far. I let the silence hang, letting the full weight of his impending financial and social collapse settle over him. I knew exactly what would happen next in the real world. The news would leak. Julian's high-stakes friends would vanish. The SEC would freeze his accounts. The creditors for his other non-Vance-related debts, the ones I didn't know about, would swarm. His life of champagne and casual arrogance was about to be replaced by endless litigation, public scorn, and utter bankruptcy. The Greenwich estate, the yachts, the holding company shares, all would be forfeit to pay off his debts and the $15 million he stole. The vengeance was complete, absolute, and undeniably delicious. My heart, which had been a frozen lump of anxiety for months, finally began to thaw, replaced by a cold, clear sense of justice. Julian, the boy who had laughed at my existence, was now facing a future that made his privileged past look like a fantasy. After 20 more minutes of tense, silent maneuvering between the lawyers, Julian finally cracked. He pushed himself off the table, avoiding Mom's tear-filled eyes, and turned to me. His face was a wreck, the perfect symmetry gone, replaced by desperation. "Sarah, please don't. I don't know what Dad told you, but I can pay it back. I'll sell the yacht. Just don't bring in the SEC. Don't do this to the family name." He didn't use his charming voice. He sounded like the scared little boy who used to hide behind my back after breaking Mom's favorite vase. "The family name?" I asked, finally letting a hint of contempt color my voice. "You used that name to destroy the foundation Dad cared about, and you stood here and laughed at me after he humiliated me for fixing your mess. You're worried about the name now?" He slumped, defeated. "What do you want, Sarah? Say it. Take the trust. Take the money. Just tell me what you want." It was the ultimate surrender. The golden boy, the king of New York society, was begging his quiet sister for mercy. I had won. But winning in this room suddenly felt hollow. Winning meant the trust, the charity, the building, all of it, would now be my lifelong, suffocating responsibility, managing Julian's shadow for the rest of my days. It meant becoming the very thing I had run away from, a Vance chained to the Vance legacy. I didn't want the trust. I wanted freedom. And I wanted to use this perfect, painful victory to achieve a greater, more unexpected outcome. I looked at Julian, truly looked at him, not as the arrogant monster who just tried to erase me, but as the scared, self-destructive child our father had created. Dad had left me a weapon, yes, but he had also left Julian a dead man walking, a broken boy facing total public destruction. My vengeance, though deserved, would simply complete the ruin Dad had started. That wasn't the end of the story I wanted. The room waited, the silence heavy. Mom was sobbing quietly now, holding Julian's hand. Sterling was frantically scribbling notes, preparing for the legal war. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly calm, and spoke to Clara, ignoring everyone else. Clara, tell Sterling that I will not file the civil action to recover the $15 million, provided Julian agrees to my terms immediately, today, in a binding contract. Julian's head shot up. Hope, raw and pathetic, flooded his features. Sterling, the predator, stopped scribbling and looked at me with cautious interest. Terms? I looked at Julian and smiled, a genuine, slow, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. Julian, the trust requires a managing director who can, manage, I said. Someone who knows the building, the tenants, and the city. The problem is you're drowning in debt, and I have no interest in babysitting you or the trust. But I am an expert in corporate restructuring, and I know how to use paper to fix problems you created. I paused for dramatic effect, letting the unexpected shift settle over them. Here are my terms, Julian. I will not pursue the civil action for the $15 million, and I will personally pay off your smaller, non-Vance-related creditors, the ones who haven't hit the newspapers yet, using the family silver I just inherited, if that's what it takes to clear your immediate name and keep you out of bankruptcy court for 30 days. In exchange, I resign as managing trustee of the Alistair Vance Charitable Trust, effective immediately, and transfer full authority and control to a new 3-person board of independent, non-family directors. However, you, Julian Vance, will be hired by the new board as the trust's salaried, entry-level property manager for Vance Tower, reporting to the board monthly. You will take a mandatory 90-day course in financial compliance and ethics. You will live in the tower's cheapest, smallest maintenance apartment. And you will work. Real work, Julian. You'll answer tenant calls, handle repairs, audit expenses. No more options trading, no more black cards. Just a salary, a small apartment, and the promise of a future if you actually earn it back. One honest day at a time. The room was silent, a deeper silence than before. It wasn't just a victory. It was a total rewriting of the rules. Julian, the self-proclaimed inheritor of the Vance Empire, was being offered a job as a glorified superintendent. But it was a lifeline, the only thing keeping him from total ruin and possible jail time. It was a forced change of life disguised as a job offer. He looked from Mom, who was crying tears of relief mixed with shame, to Sterling, who was nodding slowly, recognizing a rare legal mercy, and finally, back to me. You're walking away from the control? He whispered, his voice broken. Yes, I said simply. I've already paid my price for the Vance legacy. Now, it's time you pay yours. I'm trading control for freedom, Julian. You're trading freedom for a job. Take it or face the SEC by morning. He slowly nodded, the defeat in his posture absolute. I take it. My vengeance was complete. I walked out of Blackwood and Finch 30 minutes later, lighter than I had been in a decade. I didn't take the family silver. I signed it over to the new board to pay off Julian's debts, a final necessary expense to purchase my freedom. I left Clara to handle the paperwork, walked down the steps of the building, and hailed a cab to the airport. I was finally moving far away from New York, not running, but walking toward the quiet, honest life I had sacrificed. I had burned the old life to the ground, but in the ashes, I didn't find bitterness. I found a profound change in Julian's path, and the peace of knowing I'd used my power not to destroy him, but to force him to build himself, one floor at a time. I had traded a life of servitude for a life of my own, and in a twisted way, I had granted Julian a new, painful, but ultimately real opportunity. Now that you've seen the extraordinary way Sarah rewrote her future and her brother's, I have a final question for you. If you were Serafina, would you have chosen to completely destroy your brother, or would you have offered him the same forced opportunity to change his life in the tower? Let me know what you think in the comments below.